Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope the content encourages you and helps you build your faith. Now enjoy the message.
I'll tell you what I love to do more than anything. I love to go, well, let me clarify that because my wife's in the room. More than anything but hanging out with my wonderful wife and spending time with my children at home with my family, I love to go chase redfish. I love to catch redfish. I go about 5-6 times a year. One of my best friends lives in South Louisiana, and there's just a really great setup down there. So we go down there and we sight casting redfish in the bays during the summer. There's nothing like it. I mean, you see the tail move or you see the torpedo movement, and you just cast right on top of them and you got them. They're a blast, and I love it, right? So I went again a couple weeks ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I called my buddy. He said, man, I need a weekend to decompress. I said, praise the Lord. It sounds like you need a pastor to come minister to you. I'll meet you at the fish camp, you know? So we went and we were fishing. And the week prior to that, a hurricane had blown through the area we were fishing in. I can't remember what hurricane it was, but it absolutely, 7 feet of water went through the area we were fishing in. So the water was destroyed. It was dirty. It was murky. It wasn't clear. I mean, literally, houses were moved. Bayous were moved. It was just destroyed. And so the fish weren't biting at all. And I mean, we knew that going into it, but we get out there and, you wake up early in the morning, get on the water by 6, we're out there fishing, and usually I don't pack a lunch because we got to limit by lunchtime. That's kind of the rule, is we limit by lunch. And so we were out there and lunchtime hit and we had one fish in the box. And then I'm starting to get hungry. So what do you think I started doing, children of Israel? I'm hungry. I'm out here fishing and we ain't catching no fish. And now I'm starving, and we're not going in, and we're like, 45 minutes out at this time, and all we got is some peanut butter crackers and Cheez-Its, and I'm like, I'm starving, and all I got is these crackers, and I'm having to share them 3 ways. This is miserable. This is the definition of miserable. I'm stuck at sea right now with a few crackers and some stinky guys and one fish in the box, right? So I'm complaining, I'm mad. Happens for 3 days straight. We don't catch any fish. The last day, my buddy's son fell into the water with his brand new reel, lost the reel. He's all mad. We were like, we're out of here. Pack it up. We're leaving early. This was horrible. It was a terrible fishing trip. So we pack up, we leave, drive home. Next Sunday morning, I'm in church, and one of my friends knew that I had gone, and he asked me, he said, how was the fishing trip? And I said, it was terrible. Man, I said, the fishing was terrible. It was just... the water was messed up. The hurricane screwed up all the water. It was horrible. And he looked at me. Thanks, Drew. He looked at me and he said, well, you were still fishing, right? You were still fishing, right? And in that moment, I had this kind of God revelation that, you know what? I was doing something that I loved. I was doing beyond love, something that is therapeutic to me. My phone doesn't work out there. You can be whoever you want to be at the fish camp. That week I was Tom Brady, and we were just joking around it is like the very definition of therapy for me. And yet I had found a reason to complain about it because in my isolated experience, my expectations weren't met to the level that I wanted them met. And it took somebody saying to me, well, dude, I was working all week. I'd sure rather be on a boat catching no fish than working all week. And thinking to myself, what's wrong with me? Like, how have I found a way to complain about what I have previously said I loved? How do I talk about loving deer hunting, going to the lease, not seeing any deer, and complaining about it all weekend? You're at the deer camp. You're with buddies. How do I ask the Lord for children for years and years and years and then get them and then get frustrated and annoyed with them and not want anything to do with them and parent them incorrectly because now I'm frustrated with the very thing that I wanted? How do I pray for a spouse and ask God for a spouse and desire to meet that person that God has for me? And then I meet them and then I marry them. And then 2 years later, they're leaving dishes in the sink. Their clothes are out everywhere and the house is a mess and they don't clean up after themselves. And I'm frustrated. I'm annoyed to the point of not being able to stand them and fighting constantly. What is it about me that has made it all about me? Here is where we have to shift in order to receive what we need to receive. Today, we're wrapping up a wilderness education. We are wrapping up 2 months worth of complaining in the wilderness, and in order for us to get what we need to get out of this, we have to take a step back and realize that these children of Israel are us. And whether it comes up in the form of complaining about not having food, complaining about not having water, or in other ways, there is something here that is wrong with us that we need fixed. The solution, I have good news, is in Jesus. God has given us the solution, but here's the challenge, is we want to make everything about us, and we want to figure out how to make our lives better and make the journey that we're going through better and help us to get better, to feel better about something like this. Today is a little different in the sense that this has very little to do about you and a very lot to do about what God has done for you. Very little today is about you. How do I feel better about this and experience more victory in this and go to this greater place here? No. We've reached a point with this complaining and this whiny attitude and all of these things that there's really not a whole lot for you right here, but there's a whole lot about what God has done for you because of the condition of your heart and because of the condition of my heart. Let me read it to you. First, before we read it, let me give you a little bit of a background. And then, let's be Jews again. You want to be Jews again? Might as well, right? I'm doing it every week. New people are like, what? No. You don't have to put on a kippah or anything like that. But we're going to be Jews today, all right? But here's what you need to know beforehand. Let me give you the background. We just broke free from slavery. We crossed the Red Sea. We championed God's goodness for setting us into a place of freedom. By the way, I think we missed on the front end. We've been in this season of the book of Exodus, and the book of Exodus is about freedom. It's about our salvation. The entire book is a foreshadowing of the freedom that we have in Jesus, because whom the Son sets free, there you are. And so that all comes to a head when Moses, Exodus chapter 8, verse 20, goes before Pharaoh and he says, Pharaoh, let my people go so they can worship me. The purpose of freedom is so that we can worship Jesus, so that we can worship him the way we're supposed to worship him without the things that we're going to talk about today weighing us down. All right. A little bit more and then we'll be Jews. The first time they get into the wilderness, 3 days later, they're whining about water. 3 days on the heels of one of the greatest miracles God has ever done. 3 days on the heels of the Passover miracle. 3 days on the heels of walking into freedom. They're complaining about no water. What's God do? Heals their water. So they have water. 30 days later, what do they start complaining about? No food. Food's gone. It's been 30 days. We're out of food. We need to go back to Egypt. At least in Egypt, we had meat, and we were trading it for bread to the Egyptians. I'm out of here. We need to go back to Egypt. What does God do? Rains down food from heaven. Now, Exodus 19 tells us when they enter into Mount Sinai, it had been exactly 2 months. This final complaint happened somewhere between after the first 30 days and up to the second part of 30 days. So we have another 30-day window here. We are not talking years. We're talking days from these miracles, all right? They're in the wilderness. They're traveling. Fire by night, cloud by day. God is leading them. They see it. They know the Lord is leading them. And yet they get to this place in Exodus 17. Oh, we're going to be Jews. I forgot about that. Okay. Here we go. All right. Here. Trust me, it's gonna work here in a second. All right, here we go. All right, we're Jews. You ready? You guys, the children of Israel, guess what? We're out of water. Again. We're out of water again. It's been like 45 days now, and the promised land is right before us, and we're out of water. We need water. And what are we going to do about it? Because here's what's really happening, people. Let me cue you in on what's really going on here. God's trying to kill us. God's trying to kill us. He did it the first time with water. Don't forget that. He did it the second time with no food, and he gave us food. But this time, I'm convinced, I have the evidence in hand. God is trying to kill us. Here's what we're going to do about it. We're going to put God on trial. We're going to put God on trial. We're going to file a lawsuit. In fact, you know what? Brad, can I walk out here? No? Yes? No? I don't see Brad? Yeah? Okay. Hey, we're going to put God on trial. Because here's the deal. You're like, whoa, he's among us. We're out of water, right? Water's gone. So in order to get what we need an attorney. Who's our attorney? I need an attorney. Cam. Someone say Cam. Cam, you're our attorney. Come on. Everybody, I got our lawyer. I got our attorney. Here's what we're going to do, because this was God's plan all along. It's gone, people. So we're going to file a lawsuit against God, all right? And here's what we're going to say. We're going to say, God, write this down, attorney. Our attorney's writing it down. Come on. Our attorney's writing it down. He's got it. God led us into the wilderness, and he skipped out on giving us water 3 days after. 30 days later, he didn't give us any food. And now we're stuck without water again. Sound like a bulletproof case to you? No. 3 instances. Come on, children, you're children of Israel now. Come on, this is right? He's taking advantage of us. He wants to kill us out here in the wilderness. So we've got a lawsuit, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to file a lawsuit of murder against him. He's trying to kill me. And not only that, here's what we've got. We want capital punishment to be the punishment. Write that down. We want capital punishment. Somebody's dying for this. We're taking somebody's life for not having any water anymore, right? Where's Moses? Mitchell's our Moses. This Moses right here, this Moses has been talking about leading us and follow God and trust in him. Here's what I want. I need the Judgement crowd. I need our 5 people with the best arm. I need 5. Come on. Here we go, 1. Here we go, 2. I need 3. Come on. I need 2 more. 2 more. 4. 1 more. 5. Let's go, Janice. Let's go. Here we go. We got 5. Here we go. Trial and jury. There ain't no jury here. This is what this is. Attorney's got the case. He's tried to kill us. We have 3 instances. We are filing a covenantal lawsuit against God, and the verdict is guilty. Because he's guilty, we're taking it out on Moses. Here's your stones. Here's your stones. Here's your stones. Here's your stones. At the count of 3, we kill him because of it. This is the one who's been telling us God's been doing it. This is the one who's put this all together. And this is the reason we have no water right here. We've been following this guy. So the lawsuit says guilty. We're ready. At the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, throw the stones. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. You think I'm crazy, but we just lived Exodus chapter 17. We just lived what the children of Israel tried to do to God. They tried to file a covenantal lawsuit against him, accusing him of murder, and Moses was the one who was going to take the capital punishment for it. Let me read it to you. Exodus 17, 1 through 6. It says, at the Lord's command, the whole community of Israel left the wilderness of sin and moved from place to place. Eventually, they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So once more, the people complained against God. "Give us water to drink," they demanded. "Quiet," Moses replied. "Why are you complaining against me, and why are you testing the Lord?" That word testing is trying. Why are you putting God on trial? It gets even deeper than that. Verse 3, "But tormented by thirst," we will come back to that. "Tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses. 'Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?' Verse 4, "Then Moses cried out to the Lord, 'What should I do with these people? They are ready to stone me.'" Moses was the one. Capital punishment. We're accusing him of murder, and Moses is the one dying for it. Verse 5, the Lord said to Moses, "Walk out in front of the people. Take your staff, the one you used when you struck the water of the Nile, and call some of the elders of Israel to join you. I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink." So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. Before we get to judgment, I want you to see this. Do we got 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 4? Look at this. This is incredible. "I don't want you to forget, dear brothers and sisters," this is the Apostle Paul, "about our ancestors in the wilderness long ago. All of them were guided by a cloud that moved ahead of them, and all of them walked through the sea on dry ground. In the cloud and in the sea, all of them were baptized as followers of Moses." Verse 3, "All of them ate the same spiritual food, and all of them drank the same spiritual water." Don't miss this. "For they drank from the spiritual rock that traveled with them, and that rock was Christ." Three things you have to have in the gospel. Three things. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about salvation. There are three pieces to this that we desperately need that we cannot achieve on our own. Again, it's not about us. This is about God and what God has done for us. He did it for the children of Israel, and he has done it through Christ, who was the rock for us. Three things. Number one, judgment. You have to have judgment. We have to have judgment. I don't know about you, but when I go through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru and I order my kids' food and I ask my son, "What do you want, fries or mac and cheese?" And he says mac and cheese, and he gets mac and cheese, and then all of a sudden he starts screaming about wanting fries. And I said, "You didn't want fries, you wanted mac and cheese." And then he said, "Well, I don't want apple juice, I want the lemonade." And now all of a sudden I'm saying, "No," and he said, "I'm not eating any of this food because I don't want it." And I'm thinking judgment. Daddy paid for that stuff, boy. Daddy works hard so that you can't just throw Chick-fil-A back in the bag and tell me you don't want it because you didn't get fries like you wanted. Right? My mind goes to judgment. Think about God. He's got people who are continually over and over and over waging rebellion against him. We've got judgment that needs to be settled here. Not only that, they haven't been waging against him, but now they have brought a case before him. In fact, let me read it to you. Exodus 17, verse 2, it says, "So once more the people complained against Moses. 'Give us water to drink,' they demanded. 'Quiet,' Moses replied. 'Why are you complaining against God, and why are you trying? Why are you putting the Lord on trial?'" Exodus 17:7 is a key verse for this trial. Moses named the place Massa, which means test, and Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested, again, tried the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord here with us or not?" Massa and Meribah were both legal terms that were used in lawsuits. He is naming this place essentially covenant lawsuit. This is the place where the people put God on trial, and they filed a covenantal lawsuit against God for murder, and Moses was the one facing capital punishment for the charges. This is so much deeper than complaining. So much deeper than complaining, but now they're calling into question everything about God. And yet, what does God do? Catch this. Exodus 17, 5 through 6. The Lord said to Moses, walk out in front of the people, take your staff, the one you used when you struck the water of the Nile, and call some of the elders of Israel to join you. Watch where God is standing. Verse 6, I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. What is the rock? Christ. I will stand before you on Christ at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink. So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. Isaiah 53, 4 through 6. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us turned to our own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Judgment was needed. Judgment was deserved. They were seeking judgment, not realizing their own rebellious hearts and sinful attitudes were the number one thing that deserved judgment. Now let's go back to us, because we're the children of Israel. Sometimes we want judgment, but at the end of the day, the one who deserves the judgment the most is us from God. Yet what does God do? He takes that judgment that is needed, that has to be solved. We got a lawsuit here, and this judgment needs to be solved. And he places all of that judgment on the rock. And then he strikes the rock. And the rock supplies the thirst that everybody needs to be satisfied. Do you see Christ here right now? That on Christ, he placed everything that we deserve from a judgment standpoint. All our sin, all our rebellion, all of our deceitful hearts, all of our lying, all of our gossip, all of our addiction, all of our secret, placed on Christ. Judgment is deserved for that. And where did that judgment go? To the cross. It was stricken at the cross. He satisfied our judgment. He satisfied our judgment. Do you see the freedom in that? So the things that you have been disqualifying yourself from having an intimate, growing relationship with God about, those things that you have been placing judgment on yourself about, have been solved, satisfied, nailed to the cross so that you bear them no more in Christ. How were they able to walk into the future that God had for them, levying a lawsuit against God because God took the judgment that they deserved and he placed it on a rock? And that rock gushed forth everything that they needed. And Paul tells us that rock is Christ. And Christ, for us, in the midst of our sin, in the midst of our rebellion, in the midst of our bad attitudes, in the midst of all of that, has taken that judgment and satisfied it on the cross. I remember, never forget this moment in high school football. We had lost the game to a rival, and our team captain, he was so mad about it. Our coach had left and gone to the bus. He wanted to trash the locker room. So he was like, trash the locker room. We're going to empty all the soap dispensers onto the floor and into the lockers, and we're going to fill every locker with water, and we're just going to trash the place. And so we did. We went nuts. We busted open lockers. We busted the window into the coach's offices. We trashed the locker room, and we left. And that next morning, Coach came to us, and he said, I want to know who did this. And nobody said anything. And he said, I want to know right now who is involved in this. And we were all just kind of like silent, like, I don't know, it just happened. It was like children of Israel, we threw all our gold in something, it came back out, and this calf appeared. Exodus 32, we'll see that one. So you're like, we don't know what happened here. It just kind of appeared. And Coach was like, okay, here's the deal. Every single one of you is doing 200 up downs, and then I'll ask the question after that. And we're like, 200 up downs, Coach? Like, no, no way, we can't do that. And our team captain, his name was Hunter, he stood up and he said, Coach, he said, it was my idea. And he said, great, then Hunter, you're going to lead the up downs. And we were like, oh, great. And Hunter said, no, Coach. He said, I'm the leader. It was my idea. I'll do up downs for everybody. And we were like, whoa, like what's Coach going to do with this, you know? And Coach started doing this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he started counting the guys. And he said, okay, we got about 50 guys here, and each one of them owes 200 up downs, 10,000 up downs. Hunter, are you willing to take on 10,000 up downs? And we were like, whoa. And Hunter was like, yeah, I guess I'll take it. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember watching Hunter for a week and a half of practices. He wasn't allowed to practice until they were completed, and we had this freshman trainer that was standing there counting, and every practice, Hunter was up, was down, was up, and I remember seeing that, and at first it was like, oh man, I love Hunter. He's our captain. He's our leader. Thank you for not having me do up downs. But then it got to this place where I was like, I can't believe he's doing all of that for us. I can't believe a week in, and I'm like, what is Hunter thinking? 2 weeks in, we're going to Coach, and we're saying, Coach, can we do up downs? I mean, this is crazy. Hunter's about to die. And Coach said he wanted to do it for us, and he wouldn't let us. So we're watching him, and just the visual of watching him take for us everything that we all deserve sticks in my mind, so much so that when we talk about judgment, I start asking myself, Lord, when was the last time I really began to consider the weight of the judgment that you have taken off of me, that you have carried for me, that you have removed from the weight of my soul, from the pressure that's holding me down? When, Lord, have I considered the judgment that you placed on the rock that I deserve, but you took for me? The first step that we see, wrapping up the wilderness education, is judgment. Judgment was satisfied on the rock. Number 2. Oh, this is a good one. This one may be my favorite one. Source. There's a source. There's a supply. Something has to supply this. Something has to satisfy this longing. Judgment is satisfied. Now I need the fuel. I need the life that's going to bring me back to life. It's Exodus 7, verse 6. He says, I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink. So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. 1 Corinthians 10, 3-4, we just read it. All of them ate same spiritual food, and all of them drank the same spiritual water. For they drank from the spiritual rock that traveled with them, and that rock was Christ. This is very interesting to think about. These people were taken out of slavery, but they were still living as slaves. Think about this for a moment. They're taken out of slavery. They're in freedom, still acting as slaves. This is justification, sanctification, and the parallel between the two. They have been justified. They are set free. They are no longer in slavery. Yet their hearts are still acting and thinking and saying things that slaves would say. They haven't been able to satisfy that and realize what satisfies that desire, that trap. It's not a desire, it is a trap within them. They are free, still acting like slaves. What's going to help them be free and act like free men? When they begin to realize that everything they desire is not about what they feel, what they want in their moment, but that there is something greater that is going to supply them with everything that they need. They are free, still acting like slaves. I heard a story one time of a guy who made a bunch of money in oil, and he moved his family to a really nice house in a neighborhood, and he was meeting with these finance guys, and he was going to dinner with them, and he showed up with these old worn out jeans with that ring in the back pocket, you know, and he's got this flannel on, and he's got this old tore up coat, and he's wearing a cowboy hat that has his handprint on the front of it he set it on his head so many times after work, and he shows up to this dinner in this old beat up diesel truck, and he's meeting with these finance guys. And it's at this really, really nice dinner. And he walks in to this dinner and he sits down and they say, "Sir, what would you like to drink?" And he says, "I'll have a water." And they say, "Well, do you want it sparkling or still?" And he says, "Faucet. Just give me a water." Like, I don't know what any of that means, right? And so then they come with the menu and they said, "Sir, what do you want to eat?" And he said, "You guys got any fried chicken?" And they said, "Well, this chicken is battered and then sauteed and pan-fried." And he looked at it on the menu and he said, "Great." He said, "Give me the chicken parmigiani then. That's what I want." And they said, "Sir, it's chicken parmesan, but we'll," and he said, "Leave the red sauce out and put mashed potatoes on the side." And they said, we'll figure it out, right? And so he finishes this dinner and he leaves, and the finance guys that were with him, these clean-cut young guys, they looked at each other and they said, "Man, you can take the man out of the country, but you can't take..." That's what we're talking about here. You can take the slave out of Egypt, but can you take the slave out of... You can take these guys out of Egypt, but can you take the slavery out of their heart? Why is this slavery stuck in there? Because they're trying to satisfy their hearts themselves. It's the problem. It's over and over. They're trying to be the only source and satisfaction of their heart. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 8, 2-3. It says, "And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart." What does he want? He wants the heart. He doesn't want to give you something to drink. He wants your heart to trust him to satisfy every thirst and hunger you have. Whether you would keep his commands or not, and he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Exodus 16:33, I told you we'd come back here. "But tormented by thirst." This was when Moses challenged them. "Guys, why are you doing this right now? Don't do this, okay? Don't put God on trial. I'm warning you." But tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses. Can I tell you something? Whatever you are thirsting for, if it's not the Lord, it will torment you. It will torment you over and over and over, to a place where you won't be able to satisfy, but your efforts to satisfy will frustrate you in the pursuit of satisfying this one thing that you will never satisfy on your own. What is it? It's the heart. It's your spirit. And he is saying the whole time, it's not about water, it's not about food, it's about your soul. It's about satisfying the depth of your soul. Let me ask you, what is it now that you are thirsting for that if you don't have it, you think you would be miserable? What is it now that you are so thirsty for in your spirit that you would even begin to question God? And you pray about it every day. You ask God for it every day. You're desperate for it. God, give me a child. God, give me a future spouse. God, give me an opportunity. God, give me a promotion. God, give me my own business, to the point where you have placed so much emphasis on this thirst that it hasn't become something you've placed before God in faith. It's become something you've placed before God in idolatry. It's become a torment if I am so thirsty for what I want that if I don't get it, I'm going to call you into question. And I'm going to wonder if you are for me. I'm going to wonder if you love me. I'm going to wonder if you care about me. And God is saying, it's not what I can do for you. Trust me, my plans for you are better than the plans you have for yourself. It is what I can do in you to satisfy you, to satisfy the very depth of your soul, the longings of your spirit, so that you may never thirst. You say, Luke, that's a little bit extreme. You're talking about children. What did God ask Abraham to give up? Isaac, his son. He said, take your son down, put your son on an altar. Let's see how connected your heart is to me versus what you wanted from me. So he's the source that satisfies our heart. He has satisfied the judgment we deserve. He has given us a source in Jesus, in the rock, to satisfy our spirit. And then we finish here with grace. The unbelievable grace of God. Psalm 78, 10 through 16. Some good reading is Psalm 105 and 106 as well. It all recaps. This story is told so many times throughout Scripture. Psalm 78, 10 through 16. He says, they did not keep God's covenant and refused to live by his instructions. They forgot what he had done, the great wonders he had shown them, the miracles he did for their ancestors on the plain of Zoan and in the land of Egypt. For he divided the sea and led them through, making the waters stand up like walls. In the daytime he led them by a cloud, and all night by a pillar of fire. Verse 15. He split open the rocks in the wilderness to give them water as a gushing spring. He made streams pour from the rock, making the waters flow down like a river. Psalm 106 says, he gave them what they craved. He gave them what they desired in the face of their rebellion. Think about this. Let's wrap this up full circle, right? Exodus 15, they're whining about water. They're rebelling against God, and what's he do? He heals their water. Exodus 16, they're whining about not having any food. They're saying they should have gone back to Egypt, and what's he do? Gives them food anyway. Exodus 17, they're whining about water. They're putting God on trial, and what's he do? He strikes the rock and lets literal streams and rivers of water flow from them. What they didn't deserve, he did for them by the grace that is found in him. We cannot lose sight of the grace of God in our life. The grace of God to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Exodus 34:6, he describes himself to Moses. He says, and he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. What was Moses' response? He fell to his knees in worship because it was true. Because he realized that God had been so gracious to him, so much more than he deserved. God's grace in our lives welcomes us into his family and helps us to get to a place that we can't get to on our own in our relationship with him. Finish here. A guy named Timothy Paul Jones wrote a book on the grace of God. And in his book, he tells a story of his middle daughter who he adopted. So his middle daughter was adopted by a family, and they never really integrated her with their biological children. So after a couple of years, they canceled the adoption, and she went back into foster care, and they adopted her into his family. And so he's telling this story, and he says there was always this thing about, she shared with them, whenever the previous family that she was adopted by would go to Disney World. They went to Disney World multiple times. They never took her with them. They took their biological kids, and they made her stay with a family friend. So she would hear these stories of Disney, and she would see these pictures of Disney, but herself, she never got to experience it. So Timothy Paul Jones said, you know what? I think I'm going to plan a family trip to Disney, and we're going to take you to Disney. And so at first, everyone was like, wow, that's really, really cool. And then a month before the trip, he said, I was fully prepared for what Disney would be. I was unprepared for how my daughter would act. He said she started lying. She started rebelling. She started stealing. She started saying horrific things to him, to his wife, to her sisters. He said that the rebellion was so unbelievable. So that there was a couple days before the trip, she did it again, and he pulled her aside, and he sat her down, and he said, sweetheart, I want to talk to you. And she said, I know what you're going to do. And he said, what do you think I'm going to do? And she said, you're not going to take me to Disney, are you? And he said, the thought had never crossed my mind, but it made sense what she was doing. She had tried so many times on her own to be good enough, to impress, to mesh in with the family so that she could go to Disney with the family, and every time she came up short. So instead of trying, now she's sabotaging it. So he calls her to him and he said, listen to me. He said, are you a part of this family? And she said, yes. And he said, is this family going to Disney? And through tears, she said, yes. And now I'll read to you the rest of his words. He said, I'd like to say that the behaviors grew better after that moment. They didn't. Her choices pretty much spiraled out of control at every hotel and rest stop all the way to Lake Buena Vista. Still, we headed to Disney World on the day we had promised, and it was a typical Disney day. Overpriced tickets, overpriced meals, and lots of lines mingled with just enough manufactured magic to consider maybe going again someday. In our hotel room that evening, a very different child emerged. She was exhausted, pensive, and a little weepy at times, but her month-long facade of rebellion had faded. When bedtime rolled around, I prayed with her, held her, and asked her, so how was your first day at Disney World? She closed her eyes, snuggled down into her stuffed unicorn. After a few moments, she opened her eyes ever so slightly. Daddy, she said, I finally got to go to Disney World, but it wasn't because I was good. It's because I'm yours. That's the grace that we're talking about. That's been the desire of God from the very beginning. I just want your heart. I'll satisfy your thirst. I'll satisfy your hunger. I will meet you in times of need, and I will do for you better than you can do for yourself. But will you just give me your heart?
Everybody, thanks again for joining us. We believe God has something great for your life, and we hope this message encouraged you to take the next step in your faith. Have a great week.